The first missile of World War III would cross over Greenland in approximately 37 minutes. Not Russia, not China, not North Korea, Greenland. That frozen wasteland you barely remember from geography class would become the highway for nuclear annihilation. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the world's most powerful militaries are obsessed with a chunk of ice most people can't even find on a map. Because what if I told you that Greenland isn't just strategically important, it's the most militarily valuable piece of real estate on Earth? And the terrifying part is that almost nobody knows why. Look at a map. Not the flat one you grew up with, the real one. A globe. Notice how Greenland sits right between North America and Europe, positioned like nature's own aircraft carrier in the Arctic Ocean. Now, imagine a missile launching from Russia's northern military installations near the Arctic Circle, destination Washington. The shortest path isn't a gentle arc over the Atlantic like you'd imagine. It's a brutal trajectory over the North Pole, directly across Greenland's ice sheet. That's the Great Circle route, the mathematically shortest distance between 2 points on a sphere. And it turns Greenland into the ultimate early warning tripwire for nuclear war. Every single intercontinental ballistic missile fired from Russia toward the United States' eastern seaboard would scream across Greenland's airspace. And in a moment, you'll discover the insane defense infrastructure buried beneath that ice specifically designed to detect those launches. Here's where it gets wild. During the Cold War, the United States built one of the most secretive military installations in history on Greenland's ice sheet, a place called Camp Century. The official story was that it was a scientific research station studying ice core samples and Arctic survival techniques. The actual classified purpose was Project Iceworm, a plan to deploy 600 nuclear missiles in a network of tunnels carved directly into the Greenland ice sheet, aimed at the Soviet Union. These missiles would be mobile, constantly repositioned through tunnels stretching thousands of miles beneath the ice, making them nearly impossible to target. The project was eventually abandoned because the ice kept shifting and crushing the tunnels, but the infrastructure remains, and the strategic thinking behind it never went away. Greenland's position made it the perfect nuclear launch platform, close enough to hit targets deep in Soviet territory before they could react, yet remote enough to be defensible. But missiles aren't even the scariest part. Greenland hosts Thule Air Base, one of the most critical military installations in the entire Western defense apparatus. Positioned just 750 miles from the North Pole, Thule operates the United States Space Force's northernmost radar installation, part of a global early warning network designed to detect incoming missiles within seconds of launch. The base tracks every object in orbit, monitors Russian and Chinese satellite movements, and coordinates ballistic missile defense systems across the Northern Hemisphere. If World War III starts, Thule will know before the president does. The radar systems can detect a missile launch from Siberia in under 90 seconds, giving American forces barely enough time to prepare a response or, more likely, launch a counterstrike before incoming warheads detonate. That's the insane reality of nuclear deterrence. Decisions made in minutes based on radar blips over Greenland ice. And here's the part nobody talks about. Thule Air Base has already been the site of a nuclear disaster. In 1968, a B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashed just 7 miles from the base during a routine patrol mission. The aircraft's fuel ignited on impact, detonating the conventional explosives in the bombs and scattering radioactive plutonium across the ice. The Danish government, which controls Greenland, was furious. Cleanup teams spent months recovering debris and contaminated ice, but reports suggest significant amounts of plutonium remain frozen in the ice sheet near the crash site. One of the 4 bombs was never fully recovered. The incident nearly caused a diplomatic crisis between the United States and Denmark, raising the terrifying question of how many secret nuclear-related incidents have occurred in Greenland that we don't know about. Now let's zoom out and talk geography, because the reason Greenland is militarily critical has everything to do with how maps lie to you. Open any standard world map, the Mercator projection hanging in classrooms everywhere, and Greenland looks absolutely massive, almost the size of Africa. In reality, Greenland is roughly 2 million square kilometers, while Africa is 30 million. That's a 15-fold distortion. The Mercator projection was designed for maritime navigation in the 1500s, preserving angles for compass bearings but wildly inflating the size of regions near the poles. Greenland appears huge because it sits at extreme northern latitudes where the projection stretches everything horizontally. This cartographic distortion has had real consequences for how people perceive the Arctic's strategic value. For centuries, Greenland seemed like an irrelevant frozen wasteland on the edge of the world, when in reality, it's positioned at the crossroads of the most dangerous military flight paths on the planet. But the map distortion works both ways. Greenland's true strategic value comes from its polar position, which makes great circle routes over the Arctic the shortest path for intercontinental missiles and bombers flying between superpowers. During World War II, military strategists finally understood what maps had been hiding: that polar routes drastically reduced flight times and fuel consumption for aircraft traveling between North America and Europe or Asia. Greenland became a critical refueling hub for Allied aircraft crossing the Atlantic. And after the war, both the United States and Soviet Union began studying Arctic flight paths for their bomber fleets and emerging missile programs. By the 1950s, both superpowers were testing intercontinental ballistic missiles designed to arc over the North Pole, and Greenland's airspace became the front line of nuclear surveillance. Here's where the story gets even stranger. Greenland is technically part of Denmark, a small European nation with virtually no military power compared to the United States or Russia. Yet Denmark controls access to some of the most valuable military real estate on Earth, and that creates a bizarre geopolitical situation. After World War II, the United States actually offered to buy Greenland from Denmark for $100 million, roughly $1.6 billion in today's money. Denmark refused. Then, in 2019, reports emerged that President Trump had seriously discussed purchasing Greenland again, an idea publicly dismissed as absurd but quietly acknowledged by defense analysts as strategically logical. Greenland offers access to vast mineral resources, including rare earth elements critical for military technology, and its melting ice sheet is opening new shipping routes and resource extraction opportunities. Controlling Greenland means controlling access to the Arctic, and the Arctic is becoming the next great theater of superpower competition. Russia has been aggressively expanding its military presence in the Arctic for over a decade, reopening Soviet-era bases, deploying new icebreakers, and testing hypersonic missiles designed to fly over polar routes at speeds exceeding 5 times the speed of sound. These weapons are nearly impossible to intercept with current missile defense systems, and their flight paths would cross directly over Greenland. China, despite being geographically distant from the Arctic, has declared itself a near-Arctic state and invested billions in Arctic shipping routes, resource extraction, and scientific research stations. The melting ice is opening the Northwest Passage, a shipping lane through the Arctic Ocean that would cut travel time between Asia and Europe by thousands of miles compared to traditional routes through the Suez or Panama Canals. Whoever controls access to these routes and the military infrastructure to defend them will dominate 21st century trade and power projection. And then there's the human element. Greenland has a population of just 56,000 people, most of them indigenous Inuit living in small coastal communities. The capital, Nuuk, has around 19,000 residents. These communities have survived for millennia in one of the harshest environments on Earth, hunting seals, fishing, and adapting to extreme cold and isolation. But now, they're caught in the middle of a new Cold War, watching foreign militaries build bases, radar installations, and airstrips on their land while climate change melts the ice sheet and disrupts traditional hunting grounds. Greenlandic leaders have pushed for independence from Denmark, seeking control over their own resources and political future. But independence would immediately raise the question of who Greenland aligns with militarily. The United States has made clear it considers Greenland within its sphere of influence due to Thule Air Base and NATO obligations. Russia and China are watching closely, looking for any opportunity to expand their presence. Greenland's indigenous population, who never asked to be at the center of global power struggles, now hold the keys to one of the most contested regions on the planet. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. Greenland's ice sheet is melting faster than almost any climate model predicted. Scientists estimate the ice sheet contains enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by roughly 7 meters if it completely melted. An apocalyptic scenario that would flood coastal cities worldwide. But the immediate military concern is different. As the ice melts, it's exposing new land, new mineral deposits, and new opportunities for infrastructure development. It's also making the island more accessible, with longer ice-free seasons allowing ships and aircraft to operate year-round in areas that were previously impassable. This means more military activity, more competition for resources, and more potential flashpoints for conflict. The same climate change that's devastating ecosystems is turning Greenland into an even hotter geopolitical prize. And nobody's talking about the submarine problem. Greenland's coastal waters are some of the deepest and most complex in the world, filled with underwater canyons, fjords, and ice formations that make submarine detection nearly impossible. Russian and Chinese submarines have been operating in these waters for years, testing NATO defenses and mapping the underwater terrain for potential wartime routes. If World War III breaks out, Greenland's waters would become hunting grounds for nuclear-armed submarines trying to position themselves within striking distance of enemy coastlines. The ice cover provides natural camouflage, and the extreme depths allow subs to hide beneath thermal layers that confuse sonar systems. Greenland isn't just an air defense front line, it's a submarine battlefield waiting to happen. Let's talk about what happens if deterrence fails. Imagine the scenario military planners wargame constantly. Tensions between NATO and Russia escalate over a crisis in Eastern Europe or the Baltics. Both sides move to high alert. Russian early warning systems detect what they interpret as an incoming missile launch, possibly a false alarm, but protocol demands response. Within minutes, Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles launch toward North American targets, their trajectories arcing over the North Pole and directly across Greenland. Thule Air Base detects the launches within 90 seconds. Alerts scream through defense networks. The president has roughly 6 minutes to decide whether to launch a counterstrike before incoming warheads detonate. Greenland's radar systems provide the only eyes on those missiles during their vulnerable boost phase, the brief window when they might be intercepted. But here's the nightmare. If Thule is taken out in a first strike, blinded by a high-altitude nuclear detonation or a cyber attack, the entire early warning network for North America loses its northernmost sentinel. That's why Greenland is hardened, redundant, and considered so critical that some defense analysts believe any major attack on NATO would begin with an attempt to neutralize Thule. The truth is, most people have no idea how close Greenland sits to the machinery of potential annihilation. It's not just geography, it's geometry, the cold mathematics of great circle routes and missile flight times. When you look at a globe instead of a flat map, when you trace the shortest path between nuclear powers, Greenland stops being a remote frozen island and becomes the center of everything. It's the choke point, the early warning tripwire, the radar eye watching the Arctic, and the silent witness to humanity's most dangerous weapons passing overhead. If you found this deep dive into the hidden strategic importance of Greenland fascinating, consider subscribing because there's so much more to explore about how geography shapes global power in ways most people never see. Maps lie, borders shift, and the places you think don't matter often matter most. Greenland is the perfect example of how a seemingly empty, frozen island becomes the front line of superpower competition simply because of where it sits on the globe. So hit that like button if this changed how you see the Arctic. Drop a comment telling me what surprised you most about Greenland's military role, and check the description for links to more videos exploring the hidden geography of global conflict. The next time you see Greenland on a map, remember it's not just ice. It's the highway for the end of the world, and the 37-minute warning system that might be the only thing standing between civilization and nuclear winter. And that's a reality worth understanding.